Hey, good to see you again. This is the story of a civilization that tried to silence humanity in the dark, only to discover that humans had never needed a single light to find one another. Let the story begin. The first warning arrived as silence. Commander Thalen Vor stood beneath the black glass canopy of the Dominion warship Unbroken Measure and watched the human beacon disappear from the tactical display. One moment, the Sol deep space beacon burned at the center of the projection, a pale blue point sending navigation pulses across nearly 4,000 light-years. The next, it vanished. No explosion appeared on the long-range sensors. No debris cloud expanded from the beacon's orbit around the dead star designated Kepler Grave. No emergency transmission crossed the void. There was only the clean absence of a signal that had operated without interruption for 83 years. Across the command deck, 80 members of the Kalar Dominion remained perfectly still. They were tall, narrow beings with layered silver skin and 4 dark eyes arranged in a vertical line along the center of the face. Their civilization considered unnecessary movement a confession of uncertainty. Even in battle, Kalar officers stood like monuments. Commander Vor had spent his entire career perfecting that stillness. He failed now. One of his lower hands tightened around the edge of the command platform. "Confirm termination," he ordered. Signal Marshal Ashen Tal inclined his head over the sensor pit. The human beacon is no longer transmitting on any registered spectrum. Navigation pulse, civilian emergency band, military carrier wave, and quantum synchronization pattern have all ceased. Cause? The nullification device functioned within expected parameters, Marshal Tal replied. The beacon's primary reactor remains intact, but its transmission lattice has been phase-locked. No signal can leave the structure. Vor studied the empty point on the map. The operation had required 6 years of preparation, 200 covert survey flights, and the cooperation of 3 client species. Yet the final act had taken less than 7 seconds. A Kalar infiltration craft had approached the beacon disguised as a maintenance tender. It had released a phase anchor the size of a human transport container. The anchor had wrapped the station in a field that trapped every outgoing transmission and folded it back into the beacon's own receivers. Humanity's most important navigational structure had become a sealed room shouting into itself. The officers aboard the Unbroken Measure waited for Vor to speak. Beyond the canopy, Kepler Grave hung against the darkness. The star had collapsed millions of years earlier, leaving behind a cold remnant surrounded by bands of frozen mineral dust. The human beacon orbited within that ancient graveyard, its long arms and transmission spires silhouetted against distant starlight. It looked unharmed. That was essential. The Dominion had not come to destroy humanity's machine. It had come to prove that humanity could be isolated. Signal Marshal Tal raised his head. "Commander, passive sensors detect activity inside the station. Repair crews? Unknown. The humans are rerouting power through secondary systems." "Let them," Vor said. His voice carried the calm certainty expected of a Dominion commander, but his upper eyes remained fixed upon the dead symbol on the display. For more than 9,000 years, the Kalar Dominion had governed the architecture of interstellar communication. It did not control every message transmitted between the stars. It controlled something more fundamental. It controlled the paths those messages followed. Every major civilization relied upon fixed relay networks. Every commercial route, military mobilization, evacuation order, diplomatic summons, and emergency broadcast moved through structures whose locations could be mapped, measured, and disabled. The Kalar called this the doctrine of singular dependence. A civilization might build 10,000 ships or settle 1,000 worlds, but if its beacons were silenced, those ships became isolated metal islands. Its worlds became blind kingdoms. Its leaders could issue commands, but no one would hear them. The doctrine had ended 73 wars before they began. It had brought 31 species beneath Dominion authority. Now it would bring humanity. Vor turned from the display. "Begin the observation period." Marshal Tal hesitated for half a second. "How long, Commander?" 72 hours. The humans will attempt repairs before that. They will fail. And when they understand that failure? Vor looked once more at the darkened beacon. Then they will negotiate. Far inside the trapped station, Administrator Elena Marique watched the last diagnostic window turn red. Around her, the command center of the Sol Deep Space Beacon shook with the vibration of overloaded systems. Emergency lights illuminated banks of consoles and the faces of 27 engineers. Cooling fans screamed inside the walls. Warning tones overlapped until they became one continuous mechanical wail. The station had not been designed for silence. Its entire structure existed to transmit. 8 transmission arms extended from the central hub, each nearly 2 kilometers long. Along those arms, gravitational modulators bent space into narrow corridors through which navigation pulses could travel faster and farther than conventional broadcasts. Every human vessel beyond the inner colonies listened for those pulses. Merchant fleets used them to calculate safe jumps. Exploration ships used them to measure their position against the shifting geometry of distant stars. Colonies used them to maintain synchronized time. Rescue services used them to locate distress calls. The beacon was not the only communication structure humanity possessed, but it was the brightest and farthest reaching. Its signature could be heard from the Perseus frontier to the scattered settlements of the Orion Reach, and now nothing could escape it. Chief Engineer Malik Adebayo pushed himself out from beneath an open console, his uniform stained with coolant. "The external arrays are functional," he said. "The reactor is stable. The transmitters are producing full output." "Then where is the output going?" Elena asked. "Back into us." Malik crossed the command center and placed a rotating field model above the central table. It showed the station surrounded by a shell of warped space. "Someone placed an inversion field around the beacon," he continued. "Every signal we transmit curves back toward the station. We are not broadcasting into space. We are broadcasting into our own hull. Can we break the field? Not with the equipment we have here." "How long until the nearest support vessel arrives?" Malik looked toward Navigation Officer Priya Center. Priya checked a local tracking system that did not rely on the beacon's outbound signal. "The survey ship Far Horizon is 12 hours away. The repair carrier Hestia is 19. They will know something is wrong when they stop receiving our pulse, but they will not know why." Elena stared at the field model. A conventional equipment failure could have been repaired. A reactor breach would have triggered an automatic evacuation. A direct attack would have scattered debris that nearby ships could detect. This was different. This had been designed to leave the station intact while removing its voice. Someone wanted the silence noticed. "Administrator," Priya said, "there are 412 civilian vessels currently using our navigation sector." Elena turned. "How many are in transit corridors?" 106. Most have independent charts, but 23 are crossing unstable regions. Malik understood before Elena spoke. "Without our correction pulses, their jump estimates will drift." "How badly?" "The uncertainty compounds over distance," Priya replied. "After 6 hours, they could miss their arrival zones by several million kilometers. After 12, some of them may emerge inside uncharted gravitational fields." "Any passenger transports?" 3. The warning tones continued. Elena walked to the communication console and placed both hands against its edge. "Send a local laser message to every ship within direct range," she said. "The inversion field may curve the lasers too," Malik warned. "Then use physical couriers, launch drones, burn messages into their hulls if you have to. Tell every vessel to halt long-range jumps and wait for manual correction." Priya began relaying the order through the station. Elena looked at Malik. "Find out who did this." He gave a grim nod. "And Elena?" "Yes? If this field is Kalar technology, we should assume they are watching." Elena faced the dark canopy above the command center. The stars remained visible, but for the first time since the beacon had become operational, humanity could not speak to them. "Then let them watch," she said. On the unbroken measure, Commander Vore received the first report 6 hours later. The humans had launched 194 small drones from the beacon. Each drone carried a short-range optical transmitter and a physical navigation warning encoded into its hull. The drones spread through the surrounding sector, seeking nearby human vessels. Vore considered the act predictable. "Primitive," Signal Marshal Tal said. "Necessary," Vore corrected. "Do not confuse resourcefulness with sophistication." Tal lowered his head. The commander's chamber surrounded them with images recorded during previous Dominion interventions. One wall showed the surrender of the Yarith Combine after its 7 central relays had been disabled. Another displayed the collapse of the Valoran trade network, where 12 billion citizens had lost access to interstellar navigation for 9 days. A third showed the Treaty of Ilion, signed after the Dominion had silenced a military beacon and stranded an opposing fleet across 40 systems. The images were not displayed as trophies. The Kellar did not consider warfare honorable. They considered dependence inevitable. The Dominion had risen from a planet trapped beneath permanent storms. For the first 1,000 years of their history, communication towers were the only structures that kept their scattered cities connected. When those towers failed, entire regions vanished from public knowledge. Famines spread unnoticed. Governments collapsed in isolation. Armies marched against settlements they believed had rebelled, only to discover that storms had simply severed their messages. The first Kalar unification had not been achieved by conquest. It had been achieved by building a network no storm could silence. From that history came their deepest conviction: connection required infrastructure. Infrastructure required order. Order required control. When the Kalar entered interstellar space, they found the same truth repeated across civilization after civilization. Every species built roads between stars. Every road had gates. Whoever controlled the gates controlled the future. Humanity had seemed no different. Their ships were fast. Their colonies were numerous. Their engineers were inventive. But their frontier expansion depended upon a chain of deep space beacons. The Sol beacon was the largest of those structures, and the central reference point for nearly half of all human interstellar navigation. Disable it, Dominion analysts had concluded, and humanity's confidence would fracture. Not immediately. Humans were too stubborn for immediate surrender. But commercial traffic would slow. Distant colonies would become anxious. Insurance networks would halt cargo movement. Exploration fleets would recall their ships. Human leaders would be forced to choose between restoring stability and resisting Dominion demands. The Kalar had studied human history. They had found thousands of examples of panic caused by broken communications. They had found wars started by delayed orders. They had found markets collapsing after networks failed. They had found entire cities thrown into confusion when a single system ceased to function. The evidence was overwhelming. Humanity valued connection so deeply that it had made itself dependent upon it. Vor walked to the observation window. The distant beacon remained dark. "Has the diplomatic message been delivered?" he asked. "Yes, Commander," Tal replied. A narrow-beam transmission reached the human embassy on Talara Prime before the field was activated. Recite the terms. The Kalar Dominion will remove the inversion anchor when humanity signs the Communication Stability Accord. Under the Accord, all human deep space beacons will accept Dominion oversight, inspection, and emergency control authority. Emergency authority, Vor repeated. That was the phrase diplomats preferred. It sounded less like ownership. What response did the embassy provide? None yet. Vor was not concerned. The message had been timed carefully. The human government would know the beacon had gone silent, but it would not yet know whether the failure was temporary. Its leaders would investigate, argue, calculate losses, and eventually understand that the Dominion had already demonstrated total access to their network. By the end of the 72-hour observation period, humanity would respond. It always took time for a civilization to accept the shape of its dependence. Back at Kepler Grave, the survey ship Far Horizon arrived under manual navigation. Captain Isaac Vale emerged from jump space nearly 9 million kilometers from his intended coordinates. The ship's engines flared as automatic systems corrected the error. The Far Horizon was a narrow exploration vessel built for mapping unstable regions. Its hull carried scars from dust impacts, radiation storms, and 3 decades of frontier service. It was not armed for war. Its most powerful device was an array designed to listen to the magnetic vibrations of stars. Captain Vale leaned forward in his command chair as the beacon appeared on the forward display. The structure looked normal. That made it worse. Administrator Merrick's drone reached the Far Horizon 11 minutes later and transmitted its warning by laser. The message included sensor data, field geometry, and a request for assistance. Vale read it twice. His science officer, Dr. Lynn Okafor stood beside him. "This is not a malfunction," she said. "No, it is a demonstration." Vale turned toward the communications station. "Can we reach Earth?" "Not through the beacon," communications specialist Daniel Rowe replied. "We could attempt a direct quantum burst, but at this distance, the signal would be degraded and delayed. Attempt it." Rowe entered the command sequence. The Far Horizons transmitter released a tightly compressed packet toward the inner human systems. The inversion field around the beacon did not interfere with signals originating millions of kilometers away, but the vessel lacked the power to maintain a stable channel across the full distance. The burst scattered into background noise. Rowe tried again. The second attempt failed. Captain Vale rubbed his jaw. "How long until the Hestia arrives?" 7 hours, Dr. Okafor replied. "And the civilian traffic?" "We have located 14 nearby vessels. The beacon's drones are reaching more." Vale studied the field geometry sent by Elena Merrick. The Kalar device was elegant. It did not jam transmissions in the conventional sense. It changed the local shape of space, creating a closed path around the beacon. Any wave leaving the station followed that path and returned. The field did not resist power. More power would only make the returning signal stronger. Dr. Okafor expanded the sensor model. "The inversion anchor must be somewhere near the station," she said. "Probably disguised or shielded. Can our stellar array find it?" "Not directly, but we can listen for distortions in the dead star's magnetic field." Vale looked at her. The Far Horizons instruments had been built to hear movements inside stars from billions of kilometers away. If the Kalar device was bending space near Kepler Grave, it would leave a subtle rhythm in the remnant's magnetic emissions. "Find it." Dr. Okafor moved toward the science deck. Vale contacted the beacon by direct laser. Administrator Merrick appeared on the command display. Her face was lit by red emergency lights. "Good to see another human face," she said. "We received your drone. My science officer is searching for the anchor." Elena nodded. "The Hestia can attempt a physical removal when it arrives. Assuming the device is not booby-trapped, I have assumed worse." Vale almost smiled. "Administrator," he said, "someone chose this method because they want us alive, intact, and frightened. That was my conclusion. Any demands? Not here. But Earth may have received them before we went dark." Vale looked at the beacon through the forward canopy. "What happens if we cannot remove the field?" Elena was silent for a moment. "Then we stop thinking like repair crews." 7 hours later, the repair carrier Hestia emerged from jump space with 12 industrial tugs attached to its spine. The vessel's chief, Director Samuel Ortega, brought equipment capable of rebuilding a station reactor, sealing a ruptured habitat, or towing a disabled cruiser through unstable space. None of it could break the inversion field. Dr. Okafor located the anchor, buried inside a cloud of metallic dust, 3,000 kilometers from the beacon. The object resembled an irregular stone, but sensors revealed a lattice of folded gravitational nodes beneath its surface. Director Ortega sent 2 robotic tugs toward it. The first lost power at a distance of 60 kilometers. The second began transmitting corrupted signals and turned back toward the Hestia at full acceleration. Ortega remotely destroyed it before impact. The Kalar had protected their device well. By the 18th hour, 19 human ships had gathered around the darkened beacon. Most had arrived because they had lost its signal. Others had followed warning drones. A passenger transport carrying 11,000 people waited beyond the inversion field, unwilling to attempt the next jump without reliable coordinates. Captain Vale watched the growing fleet from the far horizon. Cargo ships, survey craft, fuel tenders, 2 medical transports, a colony seeder carrying frozen ecosystems. Not one warship. The nearest human military vessel was still nearly a day away. On the unbroken measure, Signal Marshal Tal displayed the same gathering to Commander Vore. "The humans cluster around the disabled structure," Tal said, "as predicted. Do they understand the anchor? They have located it. Can they remove it? No." Vore studied the human vessels. Their behavior matched the doctrine. They were gathering near the lost center of their network, drawn toward the point of failure. As more ships arrived, the pressure would increase. Supplies would be consumed. Schedules would collapse. Civilian captains would demand action from their government. The beacon's silence would spread outward like cold through metal. Yet something disturbed him. The human ships were not attempting to leave. They were moving into formation, not military formation. There was no defensive geometry, no concentration of weapons, no pattern the Dominion combat archives recognized. The vessels arranged themselves across millions of kilometers. The passenger transport moved outward. The colony Cedar rotated its immense storage drums toward the dead star. The fuel tenders extended transfer booms into empty space. Vore magnified the image. What are they doing? Marshal Tal examined the sensor data. Unknown. Are they constructing a relay? There are insufficient materials. A replacement beacon? Impossible within the available time. Vore's upper eyes narrowed. Humanity had built the Sol beacon over 12 years. Its transmission lattice required components manufactured on 7 worlds. No collection of civilian vessels could recreate it. Yet the ships continued to move. The far horizon took position above the beacon's orbital plane. The Hestia deployed its industrial tugs into a ring. Administrator Merrick opened the beacon's external radiator panels, exposing systems that should have remained shielded. Power output began to rise. Signal Marshal Tal's fingers moved over his console. Commander, the humans are restarting the primary transmitter. The inversion field remains active? Yes. Then the transmission will return to them. They know that. The beacon fired. A pulse of gravitational energy struck the inversion field, curved around the station, and returned. The trapped wave passed through the beacon's receivers and entered the transmission lattice again. The humans fired a second pulse, then a third. Each one returned stronger. Inside the beacon command center, warning lights changed from red to white as power surged through systems never designed to receive their own transmissions. Malik Adebayo stood at the central console. Loop stability at 20%, he reported. Elena watched the energy readings climb. Increase phase separation. If we mistime it, the lattice will tear itself apart. Then do not mistime it. Malik looked at her. You always know how to encourage an engineer. Captain Vale appeared on the main display from the far horizon. Our stellar array is synchronized, he said. The fleet is ready to receive your calibration pulse. Elena glanced toward Priya Sen. Fleet positions? 19 vessels aligned. 6 additional ships are approaching but will not arrive before the next cycle. Tell them to hold outside the resonance zone. Priya transmitted the order through local lasers. Malik adjusted the beacon's phase controls. The signal trapped by the Kalar field was no longer simply returning. Human engineers were feeding it back through the transmitter, building a standing wave around the station. The inversion field had been designed as a prison. Humanity was turning it into a chamber. Dr. Okafor had proposed the idea after studying the anchor's geometry. If the field forced all energy back toward the beacon, then the beacon could use the returning waves as a source of amplification. The station would not transmit outward, it would resonate inward. That resonance could be measured by nearby ships. And if those ships repeated the rhythm through other means, the signal might escape without ever crossing the inversion field as a conventional broadcast. It was a desperate plan. It was also the only one they had. Elena activated the fleet channel. All vessels, prepare for harmonic lock. One by one, the captains responded. The cargo ship Meridian Hall was ready. The medical transport Grace of Lumen was ready. The colony Cedar New Dawn was ready. The passenger liner Celestial Bridge was ready. The fuel tender Atlas 9 was ready. 19 civilian vessels confirmed synchronization. Elena looked toward Malik. Begin. The beacon transmitted again. The trapped pulse curved through the inversion field and returned. The station transmitted into it a second time, then a third. The wave intensified until the beacon's outer arms began to glow with pale blue light. Metal vibrated. Frost broke from the hull in glittering sheets. The far horizon listened with its stellar array. The trapped signal produced microscopic distortions in the gravity around Kepler Grave. Dr. Okafor translated those distortions into a timing sequence and sent it by laser to the surrounding ships. The Hestia activated its industrial mass drivers, firing empty cargo containers into precise trajectories. The containers did not carry messages. Their movements were the message. The Atlas IX pulsed its fusion engines. The Grace of Lumen rotated its hull lights. The New Dawn accelerated and decelerated the massive flywheels that stabilized its ecosystem vaults. Each vessel created a physical rhythm: engine burns, mass shifts, magnetic surges, heat patterns. The human fleet transformed itself into an instrument. Commander Vore watched from the unbroken measure. At first, the activity appeared chaotic. Then, Signal Marshal Tal stood. "Commander, the vessels are synchronized." "With what?" "The beacon's trapped pulse." Vore approached the display. The humans could not transmit through the inversion field, but the field could not prevent nearby ships from observing physical changes around it. Those ships were copying the pattern into their own engines and systems. "A crude optical relay," Vore said. Tal did not answer. "What is it?" "The pattern is not directed toward a single receiver." "Explain." "Each ship is producing the same sequence through a different physical medium. Engine emissions, magnetic fields, hull rotation, thermal changes. They are broadcasting omnidirectionally." "How far can such signals travel?" "Not far. A few light hours at most." Vore relaxed slightly. Then the humans had achieved nothing beyond the local sector. Signal Marshal Tal continued studying the data. A few light hours should have been enough. The unbroken measure detected the first response from beyond Kepler Grave 23 minutes later. A mining vessel at the edge of the system altered its engine burn to match the rhythm. Then an automated fuel station began cycling its reactor. Then a human navigation buoy flashed its maintenance lights in sequence. Each new source repeated the pattern. The signal moved outward, not as a single transmission, as imitation. Vore saw the architecture of the human plan and felt, for the first time, the edge of doubt. "They are using every object that can alter its state," he said. "Yes, Commander. Can the pattern carry useful information?" Tal decoded the first segment. It contains the beacon's identification, confirmation of hostile interference, and updated navigation coordinates for the local sector. "That is all?" "There is additional structure. The sequence instructs receiving systems to repeat it. A self-propagating signal. A primitive one," Tal said. "It will degrade quickly." Vore looked toward the dark field surrounding the human beacon. Primitive systems did not concern the Dominion. Unpredictable systems did. By the 24th hour, the signal had reached the outer stations of Kepler Grave. By the 26th, it crossed into 3 neighboring systems through automated cargo routes. Human freighters received the pattern through fluctuations in engine emissions. They verified the emergency code and repeated it using navigation lights, reactor cycles, and bursts from maneuvering thrusters. Colonies received incomplete fragments and reconstructed the missing sections through error correction protocols designed centuries earlier for disaster communication. Exploration ships heard the rhythm in pulsars that should not have changed. Orbital farms saw it in the timed dimming of solar mirrors. A military patrol received it through synchronized changes in the wake patterns of civilian vessels traveling ahead. The signal did not move through one network. It moved through everything. On Talara Prime, human ambassador Amara Vance stood before the Kalar Council of Ordered Paths. The chamber had been built as a perfect sphere. Delegates occupied suspended platforms around its inner surface, arranged according to the importance of their civilizations. The Kalar sat at the highest point beneath a symbol representing 3 concentric rings. Humanity's platform remained near the lower equator. For 6 hours, the Council had waited for Ambassador Vance to respond to the Communication Stability Accord. Arbiter Kesh Voran presided from the central dais. His layered silver skin had darkened with age, and ceremonial filaments extended from his shoulders like rigid wings. "The Sol beacon remained silent," he said. "Human shipping has already been disrupted across multiple sectors. The Dominion offers restoration, stability, and protection. What reason remains for delay?" Amara Vance stood alone on the human platform. She was 62 years old, with close-cropped gray hair and a dark diplomatic uniform bearing no decoration beyond a small symbol of Earth. Around her waited representatives from 47 spacefaring civilizations. Some watched with sympathy. Others with fear. Most expected surrender. Ambassador Vance glanced toward the empty communication display beside her. The Kalar had made certain the Council could see that humanity remained disconnected from its own network. "You believe the beacon's silence gives you authority over us?" she said. Arbiter Voran folded his 4 hands. "Authority is not granted by silence. It is revealed by dependence. You disabled civilian infrastructure. We prevented no local communication. We destroyed no vessel. We harmed no citizen. We merely demonstrated a vulnerability humanity refused to acknowledge. And in exchange for removing that vulnerability, you want control of every beacon we build. Oversight." "Control," Amara repeated. The representatives shifted on their platforms. Arbiter Voran remained motionless. "Humanity has expanded faster than its systems can safely support," he said. "Your frontier contains hundreds of settlements separated by unstable routes. Your vessels depend upon signals they cannot replace. If a natural disaster silenced your beacons, billions could be endangered. Dominion oversight would prevent such chaos." Amara studied him. The Kalar did not see themselves as conquerors. That was what made them dangerous. They believed control was mercy. They believed no civilization could be trusted with the systems upon which it depended. They had turned the fear of disconnection into an empire. "You studied our network," Amara said. "Extensively. You counted our beacons." "Yes." "You mapped their ranges." "Yes." "You identified the largest one and assumed it was the center." Arbiter Voran's upper eyes narrowed. "It is the center." A tone sounded from the human platform. The dark communication display activated. At first, it showed only static. Then a low pulse moved through the chamber's audio system. 3 beats, a pause. 5 beats, a longer pause. The pattern repeated. Amara looked toward the display. So did every other delegate. The Kalar technicians began working at their consoles. Arbiter Voran raised one hand. "Identify that transmission." A council signal analyst replied from a lower platform. "It is not entering through the diplomatic network. Source, unknown." The pulse continued. 3 beats, 5 beats, 8 beats. The sequence grew in complexity. Human symbols appeared on Amara's display as the system reconstructed data from the rhythm. She read the first complete line. "Sol beacon compromised." The second line followed. "Civilian route stable." Then a third. "Network adapting." Amara lifted her gaze toward Arbiter Voran. "It seems Earth has answered." The council erupted into motion. Kalar officers issued commands. Alien delegates demanded clarification. Signal analysts searched every conventional channel and found nothing. The message had not entered through a communication relay. It had arrived through the council station's environmental systems. Thousands of human-built filtration units operated within Talara Prime's atmosphere processors. Their power regulators had begun cycling in sequence after receiving the emergency pattern from a human cargo vessel docked at the station. The processors had repeated the rhythm through electrical fluctuations. Human embassy equipment had recognized it. The signal had crossed 4 star systems without using a recognized communication network. Arbiter Voran stared at the message. "A local improvisation," he said. "It does not alter the terms before us." Amara smiled without triumph. "No," she replied. "But it alters the assumption beneath them." Back aboard the unbroken measure, Commander Vor's doubt became alarm. The emergency rhythm had spread beyond every predicted boundary. It moved aboard ships that lacked human transmitters. It crossed stations whose communication systems were incompatible with human code. It entered alien trade routes through physical patterns repeated by human crews. Kalar surveillance posts detected it in engine timing. Dominion weather satellites detected it in orbital adjustments. A cargo habitat populated by the crystalline Maveth species repeated it by changing the angle of reflective sails. The Maveth did not understand the message. They understood that human vessels were asking it to be passed onward, so they passed it onward. "This is no longer a human network," Marshal Tal said. Vor stood before a tactical map that grew brighter every minute. Each light represented a system where the pattern had appeared. At first there had been 1, then 4, then 11, Now 73. Shut down infected relays, Vor ordered. They are not using relays. Disable human transmitters within Dominion space. The pattern is not dependent upon transmitters. Then stop the ships carrying it. Tal turned from his station. There are too many. Vor stared at him. How many? Current estimate exceeds 60,000 vessels, stations, habitats, and automated platforms. The number is increasing beyond our ability to track. The map brightened again. The Kalar had built their doctrine on the principle that communication required a path. Humanity had removed the path. Every receiver had become a transmitter. Every ship had become a beacon. Every machine capable of changing state had become part of the message. Yet the pattern remained weak. It could carry coordinates, alerts, and simple instructions, but it could not be heard across the galaxy. Not yet. Vor looked toward the image of Kepler Grave. The human beacon continued feeding power into the inversion field. The standing wave around it had grown so intense that the dead star itself was beginning to respond. Magnetic readings fluctuated. Dust rings shifted. The ancient stellar remnant trembled beneath the forced rhythm. "What are they doing now?" Vor asked. Marshal Tal answered slowly. "They are tuning the star." Inside the Sol beacon, Malik Adebayo's hands shook above the controls. The command center had become unbearably hot. Cooling systems operated beyond their limits. Several consoles had failed. One transmission arm had developed a fracture nearly 30 meters long. The standing wave continued to build. Elena Merrick stood beside him. "How close?" "The remnant's magnetic field is responding," Malik said. "But the harmonic lock is unstable. Can the fleet compensate? Not at this scale." Captain Vale's image appeared on the main display. The far horizon shook around him. "Dr. Okafor has a solution," he said. Lynn Okafor replaced him on the display. Behind her, members of the science crew moved through flashing lights. "The dead star is resisting because the field is asymmetric," she explained. "The Kalar anchor forces the beacon's signal into a closed loop, but the loop is slightly offset from the remnant's magnetic axis." "Can we realign it?" Elena asked. "Not from the station." "Then how?" "The fleet must move the anchor." Malik stared at her. The last tug that approached it tried to ram the Hestia. "We do not need to touch it," Lynn said. "We need to alter its orbit by less than 400 meters. "With what?" "Mass." Captain Vale returned to the display. "The New Dawn is carrying 8 million tons of water and biological material," he said. "If the colony seeder passes close enough to the anchor, its gravity will shift the device." Elena looked at the tactical projection. The New Dawn was the largest vessel in the fleet, a vast cylindrical ark designed to establish a colony on a barren world. Its cargo contained oceans, soil, seeds, embryos, and microbial ecosystems. It also carried 4,000 colonists in suspended animation. "How close would it need to pass?" Elena asked. 30 kilometers. Malik shook his head. "The anchor disabled a tug at 60. "The New Dawn is not a tug," Vale replied. "It is carrying 4,000 sleeping people," Elena said. The captain of the colony seeder joined the channel. Captain Nia Sato appeared in a darkened command chamber. She was a small woman with a calm face and a silver line of age through her black hair. "Administrator Merrick," she said. "The New Dawn volunteers." Elena looked at the colony ship's projected course. "Captain, the anchor could corrupt your systems. We have disconnected automatic navigation and reactor control. My crew will fly manually. If the pass fails, you could lose the ship." Captain Sato's expression did not change. "If the beacon remains silent, dozens of colony vessels may be lost in the coming months. We did not carry the future across 200 light-years to protect it by refusing risk." Elena felt the weight of every person aboard the New Dawn. "You understand the danger?" "Yes." "Then make the pass." The colony seeder turned. Across millions of kilometers, the other ships altered position to clear its path. The New Dawn accelerated toward the metallic dust cloud hiding the Kalar anchor. Commander Vor watched from the unbroken measure. He understood the human plan before Signal Marshal Tal explained it. "They are using the colony ship's gravity to shift the anchor," Vor said. Tal confirmed the calculation. "Will it work?" "There is a 12% probability." And the danger to the vessel? Severe. Vor looked at the vast ship approaching the anchor. The humans had placed thousands of sleeping colonists aboard it. They had filled its vaults with the biological inheritance of Earth. By every rational calculation, it was too valuable to risk. Yet it continued forward. "This is coercion," Vor said. "Their commander is sacrificing civilians to preserve military autonomy." Tal examined intercepted local laser traffic. The colony ship volunteered. Vor said nothing. The new dawn entered the dust cloud. Kalar defensive systems inside the anchor activated. A distortion wave struck the colony ship. Navigation displays failed. The main reactor shut down. Automated thrusters fired without command. Captain Sato stood at the center of the darkened bridge. Manual control teams called out corrections from mechanical stations installed generations earlier as emergency backups. Crew members turned physical wheels. Engineers opened fuel lines by hand. Technicians used optical sights to measure the anchor's position against distant stars. The new dawn had been built with systems that did not require networks because human designers assumed that anything complex would eventually fail. Its emergency controls were slow. They were inefficient. They worked. Captain Sato watched the distance fall. 100 kilometers. 80, 60. The colony ship began to rotate. Manual thrusters corrected. 40 kilometers. The anchor's field caused power surges through the hull. Lights flickered across the ship's 30 inhabited decks. In the suspension vaults, backup batteries kept 4,000 colonists asleep. 30 kilometers. The new dawn passed the anchor. For 11 seconds, the colony ship's immense mass pulled against the Kalar device. The anchor shifted. Not 400 meters, 412. The new dawn emerged from the dust cloud, drifting without power. The human fleet erupted into activity. The Hestia sent tugs toward the colony ship. Medical transports moved to assist. The far horizon confirmed the anchor's new orbit. Inside the beacon, Malik saw the standing wave align with Kepler-Graves' magnetic axis. "Lock achieved," he whispered. Elena heard him. "Repeat that." Harmonic lock achieved. The dead star moved, not visibly, not at first, but across the sector. Instruments detected a pulse rising from deep inside the collapsed remnant. The beacon's trapped transmission entered the star's magnetic field. Kepler-Grave answered. A gravitational wave expanded from the remnant. It passed through the inversion field because it did not originate from the beacon. It did not carry a conventional transmission. It carried a pattern impressed upon the star itself. The same emergency rhythm already spreading through human ships now traveled outward in the curvature of space. 3 beats, 5 beats, 8 beats, 13, 21. The sequence carried more than an alert. It carried instructions. Every human receiver that detected the wave opened a sealed protocol buried inside navigation software, scientific instruments, industrial control systems, and civilian communication devices. The protocol had a name drawn from an old human tradition, constellation. It had never been used. It had been designed after humanity's first interstellar colonies asked a simple question. What would happen if every beacon failed? The answer had not been another beacon. It had been a method for turning every star humanity could reach into part of a temporary network. Constellation woke across 73 systems. Human observatories aimed energy projectors toward nearby stars. Exploration vessels adjusted the timing of stellar probes. Solar collectors pulsed their output. Fusion arrays fired according to the pattern. At the Sol system, engineers received the emergency rhythm through a commercial freight route and activated constellation nodes on Mercury, Luna, Mars, and the outer observatories. The sun was too powerful to manipulate directly. Its light was not. Billions of orbital mirrors shifted by fractions of a degree. For less than a second, the brightness of the sun changed in a pattern invisible to the naked eye, but unmistakable to distant instruments. Neighboring stars answered, then stars beyond them. The message leaped not from beacon to beacon, but from sun to sun. On the unbroken measure, every sensor alarm activated. Marshal Tal looked up from his station and for the first time in Commander Vor's memory, all four of his eyes widened. "Commander, stellar fluctuations detected across human space. How many systems?" 112. A second officer interrupted. 240. Another voice called from the rear stations. 409. The tactical display could no longer represent the pattern as separate points. A wave of light spread through the map. The human signal crossed the Orion Reach. It entered the Perseus frontier. It passed through systems where humanity had no colonies because automated probes repeated it. Alien observatories detected stars pulsing in sequence and forwarded the data to their own scientists. The message expanded through every species curious enough to listen. The Kalar Dominion attempted to block it. They shut down relays. They grounded ships. They ordered observatories to stop tracking human stars. None of it mattered. The signal was written across the sky. It moved through the gravitational tremors of dead stars, the timed dimming of living suns, the synchronized engines of ships, and the orbital dances of machines. It could be seen in light. It could be measured in gravity. It could be heard in radiation. It could be reconstructed from fragments because every fragment contained instructions for rebuilding the whole. Within 12 hours, the signal crossed 8,000 inhabited systems. Within 20, it reached the galactic core. Within 31, listening stations on the opposite spiral arm detected the first complete sequence. The message was simple enough to survive every translation. The Sol deep space beacon has been disabled by hostile action. Human navigation remains operational. All vessels in danger may request assistance. All species may use the attached coordinates. No payment required. No allegiance required. Repeat this signal. Commander Vor stood in silence as the message reached the Dominion capital. The unbroken measure had helped create the largest transmission event in known history. Not by activating a human weapon, by trying to silence a human light. Signal Marshal Tall approached the command platform. The Council requests immediate contact. With whom? Human Ambassador Amara Vance. Vor looked toward Kepler Grave. The beacon remained trapped inside the inversion field. Its signal still could not escape. It no longer needed to. The galaxy itself was speaking for it. Open the channel. Amara Vance appeared on the command display from Talara Prime. Commander Vor had seen recordings of her negotiations, but he had never spoken to her directly. "Ambassador," he said. "Commander, you know who I am. Your ship has been watching the beacon since the field activated. I assumed someone aboard was responsible." Vor felt the eyes of his officers upon him. The Dominion did not intend civilian loss. "I believe you." That answer unsettled him more than accusation would have. "Then you understand our purpose. Yes, you wanted humanity to accept Kalar control of our communication network. Oversight." Amara's expression remained calm. "Commander, your people built an empire because you survived a history of silence. I understand why you fear disconnected worlds." Vor's lower hands tightened. "You know nothing of our history. I know your first cities vanished behind storms. I know your early governments collapsed when towers failed. I know the Dominion believes control is the same as connection, because, once, control kept your people alive." Vor stared at her. The Kalar had never hidden that history, but no other diplomat had spoken of it without mockery. Amara continued, "You made one mistake." "Which mistake?" "You thought humanity built beacons because we trusted them." Vor looked toward the tactical map filled with pulsing stars. "Why did you build them?" "Because they are efficient." "That is all?" "No, Commander. We built them because efficiency allows more people to travel, trade, explore, and return home. But human engineers do not trust anything merely because it works. We ask how it will fail. Then we build something beneath it." "Constellation," Vor said. "One of many systems." "One of many?" Amara nodded. "The Sol beacon is not the center of humanity's network. There is no center. Every civilization has a center. Ours has people." The words entered the command deck without force. Vor felt them settle over the officers of the unbroken measure. People, not stations. Not relays, not gates. Human connection did not reside inside structures. Structures merely carried it while they could. When one failed, Humans carried the message themselves. Through ships, through machines, through stars, through strangers. Vor lowered his gaze. "The anchor will be deactivated," he said. "When?" "Immediately." "And the communication stability accord?" "Withdrawn." Amara waited. Vor understood what she was waiting for. "The Dominion will also provide the anchor's technical specifications to your engineers," he said. "No species should remain vulnerable to a device we created." His officers looked toward him. That concession would spread Kalar technology across the galaxy. It would weaken the Dominion's control over communication infrastructure. It would end the doctrine that had shaped 9,000 years of policy. Amara inclined her head. "Humanity accepts." Vor prepared to close the channel. "Commander," she added. He paused. "The constellation signal includes navigation updates for Dominion territory." "Why? Your ships also rely on the routes affected by the beacon's silence. You would assist us after we disabled it?" Amara looked at him with something Vor had not expected. Not victory, not contempt, recognition. "A broken route does not ask who caused the damage before it strands someone," she said. "Your civilian ships can use our coordinates." Vor had no doctrine for that. He ended the channel. The inversion anchor deactivated 3 minutes later. Around Kepler Grave, warped space unfolded. The Sol deep space beacon released the signal it had been holding for 37 hours. The first true transmission crossed the darkness in a burst of blue gravitational light. It carried navigation corrections. It carried emergency routes. It carried the identities of the ships that had helped restore it. It carried a recording of the new dawn passing the Kalar anchor with 4,000 sleeping colonists aboard. It carried the Constellation Protocol, and it carried a final line from Administrator Elena Merrick. "Beacon restored. Constellation remains active." The galaxy heard both. The new dawn required 9 days of repair. Its reactor had survived. Its navigation systems had not. The Hestia replaced half the colony ship's control network, while the Grace of Lumen treated 43 crew members for radiation exposure and electrical burns. No colonists were lost. Captain Nia Sato remained aboard the bridge throughout the repairs. When the new dawn finally resumed its journey, thousands of ships across human and alien space dimmed their lights in the same sequence. 3 beats, 5 beats, 8 beats, a salute transmitted without a network. Commander Thalen Vor watched the colony Cedar depart from the observation deck of the Unbroken Measure. Signal Marshal Tal stood beside him. "The Council has suspended the doctrine of singular dependence," Tal said. "Suspended? Pending review." Vor almost expressed amusement. For the Kalar, changing a belief took longer than moving a fleet. "What will replace it?" Tal asked. Vor watched the new dawn's engines brighten. "Perhaps nothing should replace it." Tal considered that. "The Dominion's authority will weaken. Yes. There may be disorder. Yes. Some systems may choose independence. They should have always possessed that choice." Tal's 4 eyes shifted toward his commander. "You sound human." Vor looked toward the restored beacon. "No," he said. "I sound connected." In the decades that followed, the event at Kepler Grave became known by many names. The Kalar called it the Breaking of the Rings. Human historians called it the First Constellation. Frontier pilots called it the Night the Stars Spoke. The Sol beacon continued operating for another 200 years, but it was never again treated as irreplaceable. No beacon was. Humanity released the Constellation Protocol freely. Species that had once depended upon Dominion infrastructure adapted it to their own biology and technology. The Maveth encoded emergency signals in crystal resonance. The ocean-borne Polari used tidal changes across artificial moons. The Vossen transmitted through the migration patterns of engineered organisms between planets. The Kalar built new relays that no central authority could disable. Communication became slower in emergencies. Messier. Less controllable. It also became nearly impossible to silence. Long after the Unbroken Measure was decommissioned, a fragment of its hull was installed inside the Galactic Archive. Beside it rested a piece of the original inversion anchor and a small maintenance drone launched from the Sol beacon during the first hours of darkness. Visitors came from thousands of worlds to see them. They learned how a great empire had disabled a single machine and believed it had severed humanity from the stars. They learned how civilian captains had answered with engine burns and hull lights. They learned how engineers had turned a prison into an amplifier. They learned how a colony ship had moved a weapon with the weight of an unborn world. They learned how one dead star had carried the rhythm to living suns. And they learned that the greatest signal in galactic history had not announced a conquest. It had offered directions home. The Kalar had tried to prove that humanity could be isolated. Instead, they gave humanity a reason to reveal the truth. A beacon was only metal. A network was only machinery. Connection was the hand that repeated the message. It was the ship that changed course. It was the stranger who listened. It was a darkened star answering another across the endless night. Humanity had not replaced one beacon with another. Humanity had replaced it with the galaxy.